In early 1941, the situation in World War II looked grim for the Allies. The Axis powers, led by Nazi Germany, seemed to be gaining the upper hand. Cities across Europe had fallen under their control, and fear was spreading. In London, high-ranking military leaders and government officials gathered to discuss the pressing need for a strategic plan to turn the tide. They knew that something had to change. The debates were heated, as each strategist brought different ideas to the table. Some suggested launching a large-scale offensive to reclaim lost territories. Others emphasized the importance of strengthening the defenses in areas most at risk of invasion. Each proposal was born from a deep desire to halt the Nazi advance and protect freedom in Europe. Among those present was Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Britain. His resolve and determination to resist tyranny inspired many. Churchill believed that forming strong alliances with other nations was essential. He pushed for cooperation with the United States, hoping that if they could bring America into the fight, it would provide much-needed resources and support. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, President Franklin D. Roosevelt was facing his own challenges. Despite American isolationist sentiments, he recognized the threat posed by the Axis powers. He was determined to help Britain and other allies, even if it meant finding ways to bypass the laws that kept the U.S. out of direct conflict. As the Allies planned their next move, they were aware that time was of the essence. The Nazis were not slowing down. They had launched brutal campaigns, capturing territories like France and pushing into Eastern Europe. The impact of these victories was devastating, leading to the loss of countless lives and the oppression of those who lived under Nazi rule. In the meetings, strategies emerged that focused not just on military might, but also on intelligence and economic support. The Allies understood that they needed accurate information about enemy movements and resources to create an effective response. Coordinating these efforts required careful planning and communication, as they sought to bring together various nations that all had their own battles to fight. The discussions in London marked a crucial moment in the war. The Allies realized they could not fight this battle alone. Unity among nations would be their strongest weapon against the Axis. The decisions made during those intense meetings would shape the course of the rest of the war, laying the groundwork for future collaborations that would ultimately lead to the downfall of the Nazi regime. As these plans developed, hope began to flicker across Britain, illuminating the darkest corners of uncertainty. The Allies were determined to stand together against oppression, ready to fight for a world free from tyranny. At this crucial juncture in early 1941, the United States was still trying to stay out of the war. Many Americans felt strongly about isolationism, believing that their country should not get involved in Europe's problems. However, the situation was growing more desperate by the day. Britain was under constant threat from Hitler's forces, and the stakes had never been higher. Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, understood that time was running out. He knew that he needed to reach out to American leadership for help. In a series of urgent communications, Churchill conveyed the seriousness of the situation in Europe. He painted a grim picture of what the Nazis were capable of, highlighting the risks not just for Britain, but for the entire world if Hitler's ambitions were not stopped. Churchill's messages were filled with emotion and clarity. He emphasized that without immediate military assistance, Britain could fall into Nazi hands, with terrible consequences for freedom and democracy. He passionately argued that the fight against tyranny was a fight for every free nation. He wanted America to see the conflict not just as a European issue, but as a global one that would eventually affect their own security. The pressure on President Franklin D. Roosevelt was increasing. He understood that Churchill's pleas were not just about military supplies. They represented a call to action against a common enemy that threatened peace everywhere. Roosevelt's advisors were divided. Some urged caution, wanting to maintain the isolationist stance, while others recognized the reality of the growing threat posed by Germany. Roosevelt had been watching the situation closely. He saw the victories of the Axis powers and realized that isolationism could no longer be a viable policy if the Allies were to survive. He wanted to support Britain, but needed to find a way to do it that would keep public opinion at home in mind. Each decision carried weight, and he knew that involving the United States in the war would change everything. As Churchill's communications continued, there was an unmistakable sense of urgency in the air. The British Isles, already under bombardment, needed more than just words. They required tanks, planes, weapons, and supplies to fight back effectively. Churchill's determination rallied the spirits of many, creating a sense of solidarity in their shared struggle against dictatorship. Both leaders understood the importance of this moment. Roosevelt began to explore options that would provide assistance without formally entering the war. The Lend-Lease program was one such idea, aiming to supply Great Britain and other allies with vital resources while still maintaining a semblance of neutrality. In this time of uncertainty, the connection between the United States and Britain deepened. Churchill's courage and unwavering resolve helped to shift the perspective in Washington. The idea of standing together against fascism was slowly taking root, suggesting that perhaps isolationism was no longer the best path forward. In March 1941, President Franklin D. Roosevelt faced a critical decision. He recognized that the threat from Nazi Germany was not just a concern for Europe, it was a danger to democracy everywhere. With the situation worsening and Britain under siege, Roosevelt knew he needed to take action. Roosevelt introduced the Lend-Lease Act, a significant and historic choice that would reshape America's role in the war. This act allowed the United States to provide military aid to countries that were vital to its own defense. While it was open to various nations, the primary focus was on helping Britain, which was fighting bravely against Hitler's forces. The Lend-Lease Act was designed to ensure that Britain and other allies had the weapons, supplies, and equipment they needed without having to pay upfront. This meant that the U.S. could send tanks, planes, and food, among other resources, while still maintaining some distance from direct involvement in the conflict. Roosevelt believed that helping allies now was essential to prevent greater threats later on. Support for the act was not universal. Some Americans were still hesitant about getting involved in the war. They worried that helping other nations might drag the U.S. into a conflict that most people wanted to avoid. However, Roosevelt argued passionately that aiding Britain was crucial for the future of democracy. He emphasized how the fight against tyranny was connected to the values Americans cherished. When the Lend-Lease Act was passed, it marked a significant shift in U.S. policy. It signified that the nation was ready to take a stand against the growing power of the Axis. The aid sent to Britain under this act helped to bolster morale and provided essential support to the British military. It was a lifeline during a time of desperation. Roosevelt understood that this act was about more than just military supplies. It was also a message to the world that the United States was willing to stand with those who shared its values of freedom and democracy. The act created stronger ties between the U.S. and Britain, fostering a sense of partnership that would grow as the war progressed. As military aid flowed from America to Britain, the Allies began to feel a renewed sense of hope. The Lend-Lease Act represented a turning point, one that not only aimed to assist those in immediate need, but also signaled that America was beginning to emerge from its isolationist shell. It marked the dawn of a more active role for the United States on the global stage, as they prepared to confront the threats of fascism and tyranny together. As a result of the Lend-Lease Act, enormous quantities of supplies, weapons, and equipment began to flow from the United States to the Allied forces. This influx of material was crucial for bolstering Britain's defense at a time when the threat from Nazi Germany was particularly intense. With every shipment, the Allies gained not just supplies, but also a renewed sense of hope and determination. The aid included everything from rifles and ammunition to tanks and aircraft. The British military, which had been struggling to keep up with the demands of the war, suddenly found itself with fresh resources. It allowed them to strengthen their frontline and make strategic plans that had seemed impossible just months before. More importantly, it demonstrated to the soldiers and civilians that they were not fighting this battle alone. The Lend-Lease Act also shifted the dynamics of the war overall. As the Allies received these supplies, they began to gain significant material advantages. This support helped to level the playing field against the Axis powers, who had been advancing rapidly across Europe and into North Africa. The infusion of American resources meant that the Allies could better equip their forces and sustain prolonged engagements. With improved supplies, British forces started to mount more effective defenses and counteroffensives. They could repair and replace damaged equipment more easily, keeping their military operational and effective. As a result, morale on the home front improved too. News of victories fueled the spirits of both soldiers and civilians, encouraging them to believe that victory was attainable. Alongside this material support, the collaboration that grew between the U.S. and Britain laid the foundation for a stronger alliance. American military advisors began to work closely with British strategists, sharing knowledge and planning joint operations. This cooperation was vital not just for immediate battles, but for shaping the overall strategy of the war moving forward. As shipments increased, the impact on the war began to be felt across various fronts. From North Africa to the Atlantic, the resources provided through the Lend-Lease Act helped the Allies in their critical battles. It turned the tide in many situations, contributing to victories that would have been impossible without the American support. The Lend-Lease Act marked a turning point in the war, one that underscored the growing partnership between the United States and Britain. As supplies continued to reach them, the Allies began to forge a path toward reclaiming lands lost to the Axis powers, setting the stage for future operations that would ultimately lead to a united effort against tyranny. The impact of the Lend-Lease Act became clear in 1942, especially during the critical Battle of El Alamein. This battle was a major confrontation in North Africa, where British forces faced the Axis troops led by General Rommel. The supplies and equipment provided by the United States played a significant role in this turning point of the war. As the British Army prepared for El Alamein, they were better equipped than ever. Thanks to the American arms and resources, they had tanks, artillery, and aircraft that strengthened their position. This support was crucial because the Axis forces had been making significant gains in North Africa, threatening the security of the Mediterranean and beyond. During the battle, which started in October 1942, the British forces showed impressive resilience and determination. With the new equipment, they organized effective counterattacks against Rommel's troops. They were able to hold their ground and even push back against the enemy, marking a shift in the momentum of the campaign. Churchill had famously called the Battle of El Alamein the beginning of the end for the Axis powers. The bravery and skill of the British soldiers, combined with the material advantages provided by American support, made a noticeable difference on the battlefield. As the fighting raged, it became clear that the Axis forces were no longer invincible. The victory at El Alamein not only halted the Axis advance in North Africa, but also boosted the morale of the Allied forces. It was a much-needed win after a series of setbacks, and it energized soldiers and civilians alike. The news of the victory spread, creating a wave of hope and commitment to continue the fight against tyranny. The collaboration between the U.S. and Britain was clearly paying off. El Alamein was a testament to what they could achieve together. This battle helped to solidify their partnership, demonstrating that cooperation and shared resources could lead to significant victories. As 1942 continued, the success at El Alamein set the stage for future operations. It proved that the Allies, with the right support, could turn the tide against the Axis powers. The battle was a crucial step towards reclaiming territory and ultimately winning the war. Ultimately, Roosevelt's decision to support the Allies through the Lend-Lease Act had a profound impact on the course of World War II. By providing essential military aid, America played a crucial role in strengthening the Allied forces, helping them to gain ground against the Axis powers. This choice was not just about war supplies. It represented a commitment to fighting for democracy and freedom on a global scale. As the war progressed, the effects of this support became increasingly clear. The resources that flowed from the United States allowed the Allies to launch successful campaigns in various theaters of combat. The victories in North Africa, followed by successes in Europe, demonstrated that cooperation and solidarity among nations could lead to significant achievements against a common enemy. Beyond its immediate military significance, Roosevelt's choice helped to solidify the United States' position in the world. By actively engaging in the war effort, America established itself as a key player on the global stage. This shift marked the transition from a nation that had largely focused on its own interests to one that took a leading role in international affairs. The aftermath of the war further solidified this change. With the defeat of the Axis powers, the U.S. emerged not only as a military powerhouse, but also as a political authority. The relationships formed through initiatives like the Lend-Lease Act laid the groundwork for future alliances and organizations, such as NATO and the United Nations. These alliances aimed to promote peace and prevent future conflicts, signifying a new era of global cooperation. Roosevelt's decision also had lasting implications for U.S. foreign policy. It set a precedent for future involvement in global affairs and a commitment to standing against tyranny. The realities of the post-war world now required the U.S. to take on a leadership role, a position it would maintain throughout the Cold War and beyond. In summary, the Lend-Lease Act was much more than a strategic military decision. It was a pivotal moment that shaped the future of the United States and the world. It transformed America into a global superpower and redefined the dynamics of international relations, highlighting the importance of unity and collaboration in facing global challenges.